Hi, I'm Dr. Will Cole, and I'm a leading functional medicine expert and author of the New York Times bestselling book, Intuitive Fasting.
In this episode of Brave Talks, I chat with Dr. Will Cole, a leading functional medicine expert specializing in the underlying factors of chronic disease. Holistic care and love for the self play such a crucial part in the quality of our lives, and yet much of this message is confused and muddled by social media, diet culture, opportunistic medical practices, and more. Dr. Cole's affirmation that you can't heal a body you don't love sparks a deep exploration into the meaning of self-love and the impact our relationship to our body and to others have on our health. So, can I call you Will?
Call me Will.
Okay, because we've been buds for a while, even though
Please. Let's not be formal with this.
So Will and I met at a wellness symposium in Arizona.
A long time ago. It's cool. It's like summer camp for people in the wellness world.
It is. It's where I met a few other of my really, really close lifelong friends. So one of my questions is, how did you get into functional medicine?
Yeah. So, I grew up, I was always interested in health and wellness, and then that evolved to me wanting to be formally trained in it. And I was a nerd. I was in high school, and I worked at the finish line at the mall as a sophomore, junior in high school. And I spent my paychecks going to the health food store, buying different supplements and foods, and like just wanted to biohack before biohacking was a thing, and how things made me feel and improved my health. So then I knew early on in high school as a sophomore that I wanted to be in healthcare. So I went to an integrative health school called Southern California University of Health Sciences. And then I heard of a guy who'd gone to my school. He was older than I was. His name was Datis Karazian, who still today he speaks for the Institute for Functional Medicine, which is what all the doctors at the Cleveland Clinic's Functional Medicine Center, they're trained through the same institute as myself and my team. So yeah, I really wanted to focus just in functional medicine, dealing with people with autoimmunity and different inflammatory problems. Then I graduated. It's starting telehealth. It wasn't something, I didn't call it telehealth, and we called it a virtual functional medicine clinic because there wasn't a word for telehealth. But it was born out of necessity. I didn't think it would be the wave of the future. I thought I knew functional medicine would be the wave of the future. I didn't know telehealth would be. But it was just because I was in Pittsburgh, where I was from. I moved back, and there would be people in different cities and states and countries that needed access to this, because I was one of the earlier people having conversations and articles and talking about it online in different mediums. People wanted access to this stuff. So I started one of the first functional medicine telehealth centers over 11, 12 years ago at this point. And that hasn't changed. My 10 plus hours a day, Monday through Friday, that's what I'm focused on. Is we drop ship labs to people and give them a functional medicine perspective on their case. But it all started as a weird little teenager that was interested in health and wellness and bought strange sprouted cashews or something, strange supplement that I just love learning about this stuff. And yeah, I'm relentless in that pursuit.
That's amazing. I had a similar story in college when I would go into the co-op and look at all these sprouted nuts. And I was at the time going through eating disorders and just kind of opening my eyes up to the world of nutrition on my own. Actually, one of the things in intuitive fasting that you wrote, and I'm going to read it because I thought it was so profound, is you talk about metabolic flexibility. And you say, if you read the word intuitive fasting and think, well, what if my intuition is telling me to eat cookies for breakfast, lunch, and dinner? You'll learn in the book that when we have certain underlying health imbalances like metabolic inflexibility and chronic inflammation, it can cloud the body's ability to send us the right signals, cravings, and hunger cues. We can end up fatigued, foggy brained, and craving sugar and carbs all the time. But when you correct these underlying issues and establish metabolic flexibility, a term that comes up dozens of times throughout your book, Intuitive Fasting, you'll be able to trust your body to tell you when you're hungry, tell you when you're full, and crave the kinds of foods that will really support your health. The fascinating thing to that very simple comment is that when I was in outpatient therapy for my eating disorder, they used to say, just eat whatever you crave, eat whatever you want. And I was like, but what do I eat? Like a huge bagel with bacon and egg and cheese? And they're like, yeah, that's fine. or a Snickers bar. And I'm like, surely they'll tell me not to eat a Snickers bar, right? This is, a eating disorder recovery slash nutritionist support team. And they're like, yeah, go for it. And I just think that it's like, I felt like shit. I felt so bad. Not only what did I feel bad because I had an eating disorder and body dysmorphia, but I felt bad because my nutrition wasn't supporting my well-being. And so, we have these movements now like health at every size and, the idea of radical self-acceptance. But then there's also a point where you're like, okay, I want to approach my health from a loving place and I want to have self-love. Where do I begin? How do I start? So like you always say, you've always said this, you can't heal a body you don't love. And I have never, ever been to a doctor's office where that's the first thing they tell me. The first thing they tell me is get on the scale and let's weigh you. And then you're reduced to a number. And then when you leave, they say, well, this is what you're looking at. This is your cholesterol. These are all your numbers. And this is where your thyroid's at. And you're like, okay, but where's the human behind all of this? So all this to be said, you have such an important stance on healing your body through self-love first and foremost. And so I just want to know where that came from in your practice. I know it's a part of functional medicine, finding like the underlying issues, but it's so important to you.
It is a part of my work. You're right. It's definitely part of functional medicine as a whole to get to the root cause and trauma and stress and that negativity, mental, emotional, spiritual negativity, it will impact your health to varying degrees. It'll raise inflammation. It'll impact healing and trigger problems potentially. So on that level, it's part of functional medicine. But the reason why I think that I have conversations about it in a deep way and I make it a big part of how I'm communicating to people is really born out of my clinical practice. I see all those hours a day the impact of the why people do things is so important. The intention, the ethos of why they do what they do determines the outcome in many cases. So framing why you're doing something that's in clinical nutrition, that's in functional medicine, that's some wellness tool with a good intention or intention that has sustainability that will bring about good positive fruition in your life is so important. So anything that you do in health and wellness can be used for good or abused or be a source of like self-love and a tool to show yourself self-respect or abused. The conversation is lost when the context is lost. When you are just like, well, fasting's bad or this way of eating is bad. Well, how are you doing it? I think there's a way for a lot of these amazing tools that can be used for good or used for ill. Focusing on things that make you feel good is actually a form of self-respect. So to me, it's just the genesis of sustainable wellness. You can't have a conversation, I think, about sustainable wellness and having healthy relationship with yourself, your body, and food without saying you can't heal a body you hate. You cannot shame your way into wellness. You can't obsess your way into health. And I think that people come in with good intentions and they get lost in this rabbit trail of like orthorexia, which is the antithesis of sustainable wellness, even with good intentions. So I'm always trying to pivot people back to the center of like, why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Let's focus on what's serving you in the long run.
That's got to be hard because I know how pervasive it is. Like it's all over social media. Orthorexia is everywhere, especially when you're already in the well-being space and that's what your algorithms is feeding you. Even when something like intuitive fasting pops up, it could be seen as like diet culture. So what's the difference between intuitive fasting and diet culture?
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I wrote the book Intuitive Fasting. I wrote it at the end of 2019. I wrote it all over 2020. And the publishers originally wanted a book, or they were talking about this concept of OMAD, 1 meal a day, which is one type of fasting. And I've written about it before, and I do it some days, and I talk about it even intuitive fasting as a tool. But I thought, you know what? The conversation is going to be lost. Like the context of my message, which is like you've known me for years, like hasn't changed. Like the way that I advocate, deal with patients, the way that my message, it's evolved in my, obviously I'm always learning more with health and wellness. We all are. We all learning more as more science comes out and a better understanding of all these clinical applications. So in that way, it's changed and deepened, but the core message of what I do hasn't changed. So I thought I'm going to have a completely different conversation about fasting that's never been done, and that's still true. But I thought when I wrote it, I think everyone's going to get it. The concept that I've always been talking about with patients is intuitive fasting, a mindful eating approach and a mindful fasting approach. Let grace and lightness govern how you move and pivot, and there should be a flexibility here. And I thought this is going to completely change the way people see fasting, because I've truly seen this to be a sustainable, healthy relationship with food and fasting. And then when it was released, it was a certain sect of people. I mean, it's still, the book is doing amazing, hit the New York Times. Like, a lot of people are loving it, but there are a certain sect of people within the eating disorder community that they saw that book and were really triggered by the title of it. Like, it was so weird, phenomenon on my end to be misunderstood so much by people who had never read the book. And if they would have read the book, they would have known what I was talking about. I talk about eating disorders at length in the book, that this wasn't for people with active eating disorders. This was not an eating disorder recovery program. And it was conflated with intuitive eating, which is kind of what you're saying. It's a book written in the 90s. So capital I, capital E, intuitive eating. This is not that. But this is a book about intuitive fasting. This is a book about a mindful eating approach where we all have intuitions. We all have a deep knowingness about what serves our body. But like you said in the outset of the conversation, like I talk about in the book, when you're in the throes of imbalance and inflammation and blood sugar problems and hormone dysregulation, is it that, or is it your intuition? So it's really nice to say intuitive eating, like low I, low E, like just the concept of it on social media, the hashtag. It's nice to say that. It's a nice sounding soundbite. It's a really appealing sounding thing. Like, I'm talking to patients 10 hours a day. Is it blood sugar imbalance, or is it intuition? Is it hangerness, or is it intuition? Is it insatiable cravings or intuition? Those things are real. Like blood sugar dysregulation, insulin resistance, which is about 60-70% of the United States. This is a huge chunk of the United States, to varying degrees. Some with mild issues, some with more extreme blood sugar problems, prediabetes, metabolic syndrome, blood sugar dysregulation. And that's not even taking into consideration the other inflammatory issues like autoimmune problems. When you have that, that's proverbial noise on a physiological level. That will blunt your body's ability to have proper awareness on what even serves you, because you're going to go towards foods and things that will actually spiral more dysregulation. So it's not just some abstract pontification where it's nice to say intuitive eating, but these are people really struggling with what's even working for them. And then on top of that, there's so much conflicting information online. And on top of that, there's even more confusion when they're told, love yourself no matter what. Well, it's like, yes, of course, love yourself no matter what. But am I loving myself when I'm really going towards things that make me feel worse? Is that really your intuition? So I want to have authentic conversation about this. Is let's calm the noise in the body. Let's calm the inflammation in the body, because feeling great, that is an act of self-love. Having agency over your health, not in a restrictive, controlling, obsessive sort of way, but just you have a knowingness of what works for you, and food isn't in control of you. Eat when you want, you can fast when you want, not because it's a restrictive thing, because you can go longer without eating, because you have better blood sugar regulation and you're not bound by the next snack and the meal. Food is like, you eat food because it's delicious and because you need it to from sustenance. You're not compelled to with insatiable cravings. So that's what I'm talking about with intuitive fasting. It's a mindful approach to fasting, intermittent fasting, and food.
Very natural approach. I go back and forth fasting. Sometimes I will fast weekly and I'll do a 24-hour fast. I know the science behind it. And I understand that even though I'm not type 2 diabetic or I don't have any underlying issues that I know of right now, it's still sustaining my health. Will's got so much information in his book, and there's a lot of information with doctors supporting that argument as well. One of the things that you mentioned, I put a pin in it when you were like, you can't just say, I love myself, like I love my curves. When I was a plus size model, and, looking back, I had such an unhealthy relationship with my body. Now, on set, I loved my curves because I was being photographed and celebrated, and I was sexy, and but then I left the studio. I wouldn't be shooting for the cover of a magazine anymore, and all of a sudden I was just the girl on the subway, size 14 or size 16. And there's obviously no shaming sizes here, but I'm just talking about my body and the way that I felt, and my experience, which is very subjective. And that was that. I had brain fog. I was sluggish. I felt tired. I felt like I wasn't in the right body, if that makes any sense. Honestly, I believed that that's just the way I was. This is who I am. I was a vegan. I was healthy. I actually went to a functional medicine doctor who the first thing she said was like, okay, we need to cut out white rice and bread. And she did get into like some underlying things, but it never was, let's really talk about self love. Let's go back to the times where you underwent full body liposuction in 16 different places of your body, taking 3 months off of work, just to make my curves more defined so that I could be an even greater model and set the bar even higher, for self-sabotaging. So yeah, I guess where I'm going is like, I think about that version of myself and what you would have said to her, or what would have actually inspired her to tune out the noise and start from a place of love. Like, how do you start from a place of love when you hate your body so much?
Yeah, I think that look, and I just to echo what you said and what my whole message is with my patients and anything that I write, is that this ultimately is not about weight loss. This has nothing to do with people's weight. My advocacy is for people to be the healthiest weight for them, for their body. And we're all different, and we should be all different. We should celebrate those differences. What I'm advocating is let's let health be our common bond. And whatever that looks like, and like I mentioned at the top of the book, we're all different facets of the same diamond. We all reflect light in our own different way, but we're all part of the same diamond. And for me to say, like, they look different than me, like, that's not good. Well, you don't know their labs because there's a lot of quote unquote thin people that have really messed up looking labs. And there's a lot of people that the world would say they don't look the picture of health, whatever that means. And I look at their labs look great. So leave them alone. The problem that I think you and I are both aware of that's happening is that you take that message of self-love and self-respect, and then it's just it's blurred so much where we're now normalizing things that when they're actually not feeling good at all. And if you're talking about authentic love beyond just a vapid soundbite, it's like, no, I want to feel great. And my weight's going to go wherever it's going to go as I'm getting healthy. So like I say, like you have to get healthy to lose weight instead of trying to lose weight to get healthy. So sometimes when you get healthy, weight comes off, not because you're like starving yourself and it's super restrictive, but because your body's finding its homeostasis. It's finding that balance and that grace. But we're all still at the end of the day, even when we are in the place of vibrant wellness, we're all going to be different weights and sizes. So that's really the conversation that I'm having. So to answer your question, what do you do when you are in the throes of hating yourself and shaming yourself and you're filled with all this dread and like, where do I even begin? I think it starts with realizing that a nice sounding soundbite, like you can't heal a body you hate, like I'm always talking about, for it to be more than just another thing you saw on social media, you have to lean into wanting to learn more about your body. You have to lean into being curious on really what's going on there. So if you feel like you have insatiable cravings, or if you feel like, you have fatigue, or if you really have this underlying intuition that something's not right, and I think that many women, they know intuitively there's something off here. And it's not about weight. The weight's like just the check engine light. There's just something off here hormonally, microbiome or something. I would say lean into being curious about what that is. And that's really what the conversation that I'm having in intuitive fasting and I'm having with my patients is let's lean in and learning about our body. So maybe it could look as simple as just starting a wellness protocol to feel better, like having increased energy and lowered inflammation and better agency over your health. That sometimes gets your head enough above water for you to start to see more clearly and find a rhythm and find a grace to what works for you. Or maybe it's running labs and saying we run blood labs for people and figure out, okay, yeah, these things are there. And it's a really cathartic moment for a lot of my patients where they knew something was off. and they're told, you're just depressed, here's an antidepressant, or you're just a new mom, or you're just getting older, or you just have to diet more, you have to work out more, you have to be cheating off your diet because there's no way this could be so difficult for you. But they know this shouldn't be this difficult for me. There's something going on. And then we can substantiate that with labs and really know, look, you're not crazy. There's something going on. This is going to make anybody feel miserable. And we have to know what we're dealing with to do something about it. Whatever it is, it could be a confluence of factors. I see this forgiveness process happens with people when they start seeing it's like tears come out, but it's not tears of sadness because they already knew something was off. It's tears of joy to know, yes, this was off here and I can start moving in the right direction. It's not going to be a quick fix. And they start to really learn to love their bodies through that process. Because when you start finding balance, that's so encouraging, and you start to have more good days versus bad days. That's encouraging.
Yeah, and I can imagine tears of relief as well that a doctor actually heard you and took the time to dig a little bit deeper than an inch in a prescription.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's definitely true. People want to be heard, and people want to be seen, and people want to be validated and given the time of day. I mean, this is their everyday. I mean, there's a sea of people going through this that are just delegitimized, and unintentionally or unintentionally, depends on what your case you're talking about. But there's a systemic delegitimization of women that know their bodies, they know something's off, and they're told there's nothing wrong with you. And then again, there's this chatter going on social media that I think is adding to the confusion unintentionally as well, because they're just like, don't look into it, basically, just love yourself. And that further perpetuates this disordered relationship with what's actually going on.
Absolutely. Random question. What's your take on medical marijuana?
It's a tool. It's a tool that many of my patients have to use for a variety of different reasons. I have patients that have MS and different neurological autoimmune problems that it's a lifesaver for them. It's a game changer for them. I have patients with panic attacks. It's a game changer for them. I have patients with sleep disorders. It's a game changer for them. People with chronic pain, game changer for them. So it's a tool to consider. So I'm for it when it's clinically appropriate.
Do you guys prescribe it?
We don't. We're not a medical marijuana clinic, but we refer out and advise it. And at least we're giving a functional medicine perspective on it. And then we're working in conjunction with that prescribing doctor.
It's been an interesting experience for me because I wouldn't call myself a pothead, but not that it makes you a pothead to actually use a natural tool. But it's been a wonderful relief for me because I have panic attacks or anxiety or whatever it is. And I get these muscular tics as well. And it helps with all of that. It's interesting conversation because I grew up in a very conservative household where it was, a very bad thing. And now I have a whole different perspective on it because it is truly plant medicine. It's healing.
Yeah, it is. I think there's a learning curve for people. I think you're right. There's a lot of stigma around it. Even with CBD, which is interesting, there's a lot of stigma around that. And I see a lot of the CBD companies out there really trying hard to even just educate people that there's no THC in these things, or negligible amounts of THC. It's not the same thing because of the amount of stigma around it. But even, yeah, right, even more so with things that contain THC in it too. But no, it's a tool, and I think that we it definitely can be a problem for some people. I don't want to make it light hearted where it's just like it should just be given out like candy. I don't think it's right for everybody. But I do think when it's clinically appropriate, it can be a great tool.
For sure. Now, you have 2 daughters, right?
A son and a
A
daughter.
son and a daughter. Okay. So how do you talk to them about their body image and self-love?
Yeah. So, I mean, we as parents, we know our kids, right? We know how they receive information. We know we kind of can feel energetically the way that they receive information and make it age appropriate as well. So, I think that conversation always evolves with us knowing our kids and their spirits, but also what's age appropriate too in the conversations that you would have around these sort of things. And it always started for me, and this applies to my son and my daughter, but I do think that there's an added, like, food and diet culture is weaponized so much more against women. So I'm very cognizant and just like learning so much with my patients over the years. Like my heart is so tender to these things, talking to people all day long. And obviously my wife, who's educated me for the past 13 years on these things too. So it's a little bit different with my daughter, but I'll say this: for different reasons, it should be just as talked about, and uh, we need to be aware of the fact that our boys, our sons, need to be having these conversations as well for themselves, because guys have it in a different way, but it can be just as toxic in some ways. But also how guys see women and judge women because of diet culture. So boys that use that same diet culture to weaponize against women and judge them and slight them off, whatever. So I think that the conversation needs to be had to all kids. It's around health. It's about health. And it really just saying, look, this isn't about all the things you can't have. I always tell my kids this, then I tell my patients this: you can have whatever you want. There's no problem with that. The problem is, how do we see ourselves? And avoiding things that don't make you feel good isn't restrictive, it's self respect. Going for things that make you feel great is a form of self respect. So that's what this is about. So my kids have their center, and my son is way pickier than my daughter. And we know, again, our kids are way different, and some kids are just more pickier than others. And but I'm always trying to focus on, like, let's bring these things in, not all the things you can't have, but what things will make you feel good. And you know these things don't make you feel good when you have lots of them. So use that as a mindfulness practices, which is these same principles that I've been talking about with my patients, and with intuitive fasting. I talk about it too. It's bringing, when you eat something, take inventory of how it makes you feel. Like my son, good example. It's like, no, that didn't make me feel good. Okay, so next time you probably won't have as much of it, or you won't have it at all because you love feeling great more than you thought you missed that, or thought that you wanted that. So it's that those are the conversations that I'm having with both of my kids. And it's interesting to see them now at 14 and 11 be able to go to a restaurant, and they'll be able to order off of the menu and say, like, I'm not, like, they're gluten free, right? So, and not that being gluten free is healthy, but they know that wheat and having lots of pastas and breads and things don't make them feel good. So they're going and choosing the menu and know how to order for themselves in a way that I'm impressed as, like, a dad. And it's just cool to see them own it for themselves. It's not this thing because, like, dad's telling them to do. I want them to have agency over their health, so they can be equipped with these tools that maybe they will have things that I know, like, clinically wouldn't be the best for them as a functional medicine practitioner. But as their dad, I want them to learn for themselves how these things make them feel. And we have good things in the home. So that's the other thing too, is parents, like, we determine what's in the home. So fill your cupboards and your fridge with good things, healthy things. So that's normalized. If you create a foundation that's built on self respect and valuing your health, that's so important. Then it won't be shaming them. It won't be the source of restriction. So pick better alternatives, and they can still live their life and be kids.
It's almost as if you're not even focused on the Cadbury egg for Easter, or, the Eggo waffle, but rather you're saying, let's just focus on your intuition and like how you feel. And then you give them the agency to actually make decisions on their own, because it's based off of how they feel and not about that thing, that one carrot they were chasing, but rather you're giving them that agency to own themselves, and that's really powerful.
It is. And I think raising their awareness, it's not about shaming other people and saying, like, we're better than them and they're better. Because look, a lot of it, there is a disconnect, and there's not enough education and empowerment about these topics. So it's like there's a no judgment zone about other people in my house. Like, it's not about we do things better. They don't think that at all. My kids don't think like that. I always tell my kids, and I tell my patients this too. It's like, just because something's common doesn't necessarily mean it's normal. Because they have said when they were younger, like, oh, all, like, everybody else eats that way. We eat differently at our home. You're right, it is. It's different. But you know what's also really common? Chronic health problems. And sometimes it's a big conversation about our country has a real messed up relationship with food. Just because it's your everyday doesn't mean you should settle for or just normalize something that's actually feeding chronic health problems. I mean, when you talk about the majority of the United States having a massive blood sugar problem, and 50 million Americans have an autoimmune disease, this is like, look, If anything, I have a heart for those people because we're all raised in a culture that says this is normal and do this. And then you have the diet culture on top of that, shaming them out. And it's really part of the same system. So to me, it's just educating kids age appropriately, not based in fear, but based in, look, this is out there and we want to do everything we can to feel great and do things that make us feel great.
What's a normal dinner for you and the kids?
So what did we have? I mean, we had the other night we had grass-fed beef burgers. That's really common in the house. Like I'll grill out there, and my daughter's basically a vegetarian, pescatarian. She'll have fish. So I'll have wild caught fish, like grilled fish, grass-fed beef for some people in the family. Do like a veggie burger that's healthy, like black bean burger or something like that. Lots of vegetables, sautéed vegetables, cooked vegetables, basic stuff, but it's things that I modify things for people that eat slightly differently, but it's a lot of good food, it's a lot of delicious food. If you had to describe how my kids eat, it's sort of like a gluten-free, paleo-ish, flexible way of eating.
So I remember in high school going to school and buying school lunches, which were everything brown. But when your kids go to school, I don't know where they are during the pandemic, if they're studying at home or if they're at school, but what do they eat for lunch? Do you pack their lunch or do they eat at school?
Well, we have a weird situation because we homeschool. So our kids have been homeschooled for about 6 or 7 years.
Okay.
So it's it's a little bit easier, but look, so the comparable would be when my kids go over to their friend's house. That would be the comparable because it's like you can't control everything. It's a shame with the school situation. It really is. Like they did go to school when they were younger, and I remember when I went to school, like it was so strange the what they're feeding kids. And I think certain school districts in certain areas are trying to do better options, but there's really no education behind it. So kids, I don't even know how effective that is. My kids know what makes them feel good. They know their center of like the more or less the things they can pick from, and they will make modifications when they're over the house. But just similar to restaurants, like if they have the options, or if they choose to have something that their friends having that they normally wouldn't do at home, they know it's not their everyday, they'll have whatever that's there. But it's a little bit different with our kids' friends because their families know how we live our life. A lot of them do live their life similarly, maybe not exactly the same. So it's a little bit more controlled in that way. But I want my kids, again, to have choice, to have freedom, have flexibility, and learn about how these things make them feel. So they can own it for themselves, and it's not some arbitrary rules of do's and don'ts, which I don't think really works well in the long run. I want people to actually be empowered with these things, including my kids.
How did you guys choose the homeschooling route?
It was multifactorial, but one of it was my son was being bullied in school. And we had exhausted all measures. We like met with the other parents, met with the principal, did all the things, but it was a smaller school. We live in the country, and it just wasn't going anywhere. It was like there was such a toxic setup, and it was a small enough school where it was like my son had nowhere to go. Like it was like no, that was like if you didn't get along with that group of people, it was like you had no one else to go to. So it was really born out of that, and we kind of already wanted to do it. So that was the impetus to kind of make that shift. And the other part of it was I travel a lot for work. I mean, barring this pandemic in the past year, but really because I'm seeing patients for 10 plus hours a day, I wanted to take one or both of my kids with me when I would travel because I'm like, I'm not spending a whole week without them. Because, when you get home from work, it's like you're with them for a couple of hours and you have to put them to bed. So I'm like, my weekends are like sacred time with them and me. So like I would always bring one or both of them with me to a different work event. So that was the other thing too, because that doesn't work well with the traditional school model. Because then it's like the teachers are having to like prepare, and I get it. Like my two of my sister-in-laws are teachers. Like I get it. Like it's probably really annoying for kids that are always traveling. So just that traditional model just didn't work for us so much. It worked really well that they'd be doing school on the plane or in hotels with me on the weekends and like catching up on things, and it worked out really well, and it served us for many reasons over the years.
Is your wife the teacher?
She is. She is. God bless her. I know. So I can't take credit for it. I mean, I do a little bit here and there. She's the main focus. And they have cool co-ops out there too, where they're doing a lot of group model things through the co-ops, but it's flexible. So you still have that group interaction, and they're actually involved with lots of different group things. That's one like critique that people have with homeschooling, but there's so much socialization out there for options for people that aren't traditional but are very socialized.
Now, you talk about your relationship with your kids. What about your relationship with your wife? I'm in this phase of like reprioritizing my life because I have a kid now. Before it was so easy, like Matt and I could kind of flow back and forth between career and our relationship. And then with a kid and a toddler who's so needy, I'm like, "Oh my gosh, sometimes we forget about each other." And we have to really prioritize ourselves even before the kid. And I'm wondering how you do that, what that looks like for you and your wife.
I've been married for a long time. I met her when I was 20 years old and got married about a year after that, 21. And we've been married for however long. I'm 37 now. So I've been married a long time. So I've spent literally my entire 20s and now most of all my 30s so far with her. So it's you know what I mean? Like it's just, that's not common. It's taken a lot of work, a lot of being intentional and learning to grow together and not apart, and learning to accept things and that maybe mainly annoy her about me, not the other way around. You know what I mean? It's just like having a inner like grace for the other person. And you know what she's taught me lately, and it's like deepening with me, is like believing the best in the other person.
Mm.
And, like, that's something that I'm always like, if I get defensive or I'm like, "Oh, I feel like I have to, like, explain myself," am I believing the best in her? And vice versa, and she's doing that, and it's a constant. I've heard it said, and I think it's true, it's like marriage or whatever you wanna, if you're not married, but I'm married, marriage is like the ultimate meditation and everything that's wrong with you. It's like, and like, I truly have seen that. I've seen like this is like deep, uh, the Hebrew word tikkun, like the deep correction of like working on stuff that is your selfish parts. That's like doesn't come easy, but it creates the greatest light when you lean into that, the selfish parts of you, and start to be more selfless.
Yeah, it's like healing in a whole nother realm.
It is. Again, getting married at 20, where I met her at 20, got married at 21, I thought I knew everything, like, but looking back at people at the like, and now at 37, and I'm seeing 20-year-olds and 20-year-olds, I'm like, "What the heck was I thinking?" You expand so much between 20 and 30, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Yeah, of course, if you're 20, 21, you are the best version of yourself, or I hope the best at 21, but you're gonna evolve so much over the course of that 10 years, and then let alone at your late 30s, and I'll continue to. So it's just, to me, there's just so much evolving that happens that it's important for us to just give each other grace and grow together, as what I would say has served me well so far.
Yesterday, Matt and I went on a walk and he was like, "Honey, you have changed so much." And I was like, "Oh God, here comes the conversation." And he was like, "No, no, no. Like the last year, you started off, this is pre pandemic. So, pre pandemic, I was like gung ho, I'm going to homeschool, I'm going to cook every meal and I was doing that anyway because of Ollie's allergens and cross contamination and stuff. And that's just the way that I like to do things anyway. I feel better when I cook at home. So I was kind of like that Martha Stewart Pinterest wife and like really leaning hard into it. But then the pandemic really, it magnified all of those little like chinks in that diamond that you're talking about. And I was able to see like what I need to feel well and to thrive. It was different than what I thought it was. So he's like, a year ago you were like, I'm going to homeschool. And now like somebody comes over to the house and you're like, you want a kid? Here, take him. Take like, take this child. And I thought it was going in like a marital direction where he's like, you've changed so much. We've drifted apart. Yeah. But no, it is, we expand so much in a year. We expand so much. It's so easy to compare yourself to everyone else's journey, but then to be brave enough and to say, I just need to tune all that noise out. And then this is applicable to any situation, to health with your body, to health in your mind. And when you talk about grace, That is grace, giving yourself the grace to change in a way that fits into your personal well-being and what that definition is.
100%. I mean, it's so true. I mean, you can have the best of intentions or like, well, that's your plan. But if it's like, if it doesn't work out that way, or you've realized, hey, this isn't actually, I was comparing myself to other people too much. And we have all this comparison out there with social media, with Instagram, algorithms, and Pinterest, all that stuff. And it's like, we need to realize that our book is our book and it's our life, and we need not compare our book with someone's highlight reels of things that they want you to see or things that our algorithm determines that you get to see, which is not real life. It's so true. And be okay with pivoting, and be okay also with changing your mind and giving yourself grace, and also be okay that what is right for you today won't necessarily be the forever. And it's okay to determine later on what served you before is not what's serving you now, and you're able to evolve past that. You're right. It's a powerful principle for their relationships, with their job, for someone's health, with so much in life.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Will. I am so excited for you, and I've loved watching you just skyrocket, and you're like in the stars now with your new book and with your other books as well. I'm just really happy for you
Oh, thank you.
because you just come from the heart, and I feel it, and it's obvious with everything you do and touch and say. So, thank you. All right, so I have some rapid fire questions for you. Are you
Okay.
ready?
Yeah, let's go.
All right. So, something most people don't know about you.
I'm learning about the Enneagram, which is kind of a personality thing. And I'm by no means an expert, but I'm an Enneagram 5 wing 6. So your animal that's like attached completely. This is so weird. For people that don't know the Enneagram, check it out. But it's about your relationship with the world around you, and it has to do with, honestly, with your childhood messages that you get as a kid, and childhood like trauma or wounding. We all have that. We're all humans and born in this world. So 5 is like an investigator. So I think, and this is not rapid fire now. I'm ruining rapid fire.
Keep
But
going, keep going.
5's an investigator. So which makes sense. Like, I'm a clinical like Sherlock Holmes when it comes to my patients in their labs, and I have like voracious. Like, I'm so like, if I don't know something, I have to figure it out and like research it. But a 5 animal, like you can see it on probably Pinterest or Instagram, or where you're an owl if you're a 5, and a 6 is a deer. It's a little bit more like alert and cautious at times. So I'm like, if an owl and a deer had a baby, that would be me. Some people don't know that.
Okay, cool. Can you describe healing in 3 words?
I would say 3 separate words. It would be self-respect and grace.
What's on your night table?
I'm like a walking cliche. My night table, it's like there's like a piece of selenite, and like, and I study the Zohar at night. I don't know if you know about that, but it's like an ancient book, and yeah, so I'm reading that. So it's a true wellness aficionado right there and then, and a health book. I think there's always a health book of people coming on podcasts or latest like research journal, something like that.
What's the last book you read?
I'm rereading Eckhart Tolle, Power of Now. I love his stuff. Yeah.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Classic. Actor you'd choose to play you in a movie about your life?
Oh man, I don't know. I would say I don't even know. I honestly don't. I'm so bad at this. It's like I want to give you an answer, but I'm trying to think. I don't know.
Okay. We could ask the listeners.
Yeah, there you go.
Fill in the blank. Life is
Beautiful, and difficult, but that's part of what makes it beautiful.
I love that you shatter the perception of beauty and make it imperfect.
Back to that cocoon thing. I mean, the meditation of everything that's wrong with you. I think there's beauty in that.
If you could have any job in the world and you'd be great at it, but you couldn't have the job you had now, what would it be?
Well, I just on like obviously I love what I do. It's a passion of mine, and I do get to do what I love to do because I'm that investigator. I get to figure things out and be relentless, and I love writing. So I guess if I didn't, I love writing about this stuff. So I guess if I didn't write around health, I would. That's kind of what I do. But if I could say like I write something else, I would probably write. I would still be a writer, but it'd probably be just a different way, or do that full time. I love writing a lot.
Favorite place you've ever traveled?
I'll tell you, I spoke at an event in the Cayman Islands, Grand Cayman. That was like the best trip. Part of it was the people, like the place I was staying at, where the hospitality was amazing. But that island in general was like this oasis. So I would say Grand Cayman.
Best dining experience of your life?
I'm a simple guy. Like I don't really like even like fancy restaurants that much. I just like good food. So, I mean, it doesn't take much to impress me when it comes to dining experiences if it's just good, healthy food that tastes great. In New York City, ABC Kitchen,
Yeah.
the Spanish one, Cochina, I think
Yeah.
it is. It's like an underwater barnacles on the wall.
Yeah.
Haven't been back since pandemic. It's like hurting my heart, but that
Very good.
a very cool ambiance and good for good fish tacos as well.
Okay, and what do you want your legacy to be?
Just that I showed kindness, authentic kindness to people that I didn't necessarily agree with or people that were different than me, because that's true kindness. And I think that our world today likes to talk about kindness, but they don't. They're only kind to be with you if you agree with them. There's like this horrible imitator, this fraud of kindness that's out in the world today that I want to be known for, like the authentic, real kind of kindness that it's like I accepted and loved people even when they disagreed with me.
I just read a poem on kindness, and I'll read it to you as we wrap up. So it's called Kindness by Naomi Shihab Nye. Before you know what kindness really is, you must lose things. Feel the future dissolve in a moment, like salt in a weakened broth. What you held in your hand, what you counted and carefully saved, all this must go so you know how desolate the landscape can be between the regions of kindness, how you ride and ride, thinking the bus will never stop, the passengers eating maize and chicken will stare out the window forever. Before you learn the tender gravity of kindness, you must travel where the Indian in a white poncho lies dead by the side of the road. You must see how this could be you, how he too was someone who journeyed through the night with plans and the simple breath that kept him alive. Before you know kindness as the deepest thing inside, you must know sorrow as the other deepest thing. You must wake up with sorrow. You must speak it till your voice catches the thread of all sorrows and you see the size of the cloth. Then it is only kindness that makes sense anymore, only kindness that ties your shoes and sends you out into the day to mail letters and purchase bread, only kindness that raises its head from the crowd of the world to say, "It is I you've been looking for," and then goes with you everywhere like a shadow or a friend.
I love that. How did you even have that pulled up that quickly? That was brilliant.
I love poetry, and I just read this to my son and my family for Easter. And I also love reading Brain Pickings from Maria Popova,
Mhm.
and she always has amazing poetry on her site. And I try and remember some of the poetry. And
I love that. Kindness, man. The world needs more of the real stuff.
thank you so much, Will. You are a blessing to the world, and
Thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate you so much. Thanks for reaching out.
I just am so grateful for your time and for your energy and your love that you put out there.
Thank you. Likewise.
In the next episode of Brave Talks, I chat with Reagan Walsh, best-selling author of Heart Boss, Trust Your Gut, Shed Your Shoulds, and Create a Life You Love. Reagan is an NYU certified executive and life coach who focuses on helping women who are overprogrammed and underwhelmed to reclaim their personal and professional lives. We explore facets of heart bravery. How does the courage to set boundaries, ask for help, and be vulnerable ultimately enliven our relationships and help us love better? Brave Talks is sponsored by Taja Collection Custom Candles. Taja Collection has designed a very special, really beautiful, amazing Be Pretty Brave candle for all of you listeners who want to light up a beautiful message in your home or send it as a gift to those who could use bravery and courage in their lives. You can find the candle on tajacollection.com. That's TAJA collection.com. And you can search for Be Pretty Brave and you'll find the candle there. Brave Talks is produced by Madeleine Inskeep. Video production is by Wallace Cruz. The music is produced by my dear friend Murray Hidary with Mind Travel. A heartfelt thanks to these three who support Brave Talks with their incredible talent and gifts. If you'd like to receive my monthly thoughts and a recap of this month's Brave Talks, head on over to emilynolan.com and click subscribe. Thanks for listening.